Lieutenant Sarah Chen adjusted her desert camouflage uniform one final time before stepping into the briefing room at Forward Operating Base Wolverine in Afghanistan. The morning sun cast long shadows across the compound as she made her way through the maze of concrete barriers and sandbags that protected the base from enemy fire. At 26 years old, Sarah had already broken more barriers than most people face in a lifetime. She was the first woman to complete the grueling Navy SEAL training program, enduring months of physical and mental torture that broke even the strongest men. Her compact 5'4" frame housed muscles forged through countless hours of training, and her dark eyes held the steady focus of someone who had learned to hit targets from impossible distances. The briefing room buzzed with conversation as 32 elite soldiers from various special operations units gathered for their mission assignment. Sarah noticed the familiar pattern as she entered. Conversations paused, heads turned, and whispers followed in her wake. Despite her proven record and exemplary performance in previous missions, she still felt like an outsider in this world dominated by testosterone and tradition. Commander Jake Morrison stood at the front of the room, his weathered face bearing the scars of 2 decades in special operations. Behind him, a large digital screen displayed satellite imagery of a mountainous region along the Pakistan border. Red markers indicated enemy positions, while blue dots showed friendly forces. Sarah took a seat in the third row, her sniper rifle case positioned carefully beside her chair. The weapon inside was her trusted companion, a customized M24 SWS that she had personally modified for extreme long-range engagements. She had named it Whisper for its ability to deliver silent death from distances that seemed impossible to most people. The room gradually filled with the cream of America's Special Forces community. Navy SEALs, Army Rangers, Marine Force Recon, and Delta Force operators filled every seat. These were men who had seen combat in Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, and countless other theaters where America's interests required surgical precision rather than overwhelming force. Commander Morrison cleared his throat, and the room fell silent. His voice carried the authority of someone who had led men through hell and brought them home alive. "Gentlemen and lady," he began, nodding slightly toward Sarah, "we have a situation that requires immediate attention. Intelligence reports indicate that a high-value target has established a command center in the Hindu Kush Mountains, approximately 40 miles northeast of our current position." The screen changed to display detailed topographical maps showing elevation changes, wind patterns, and potential approach routes. Sarah studied the terrain with the practiced eye of someone who understood how geography could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophe. Morrison continued his briefing, explaining that the target was believed to be Ahmed al-Rashid, a senior Taliban commander responsible for coordinating attacks against coalition forces throughout the region. Intelligence suggested that al-Rashid would be meeting with several other high-ranking insurgent leaders to plan a major offensive against civilian targets in Kabul. "The compound is heavily fortified," Morrison explained, pointing to the satellite imagery. "We're looking at approximately 50 to 60 enemy combatants, including experienced fighters who have been battling coalition forces for years. The terrain is challenging, with limited approach routes and multiple defensive positions." Sarah raised her hand, and Morrison nodded for her to speak. "Sir, what's the timeline for this operation?" she asked, her voice steady despite the tension she felt from being the focus of 31 pairs of skeptical eyes. "We deploy at 400 hours tomorrow morning," Morrison replied. "The target will be in position for a limited window, and we cannot afford to miss this opportunity." A sergeant sitting 2 rows ahead turned partially around and spoke loud enough for several people to hear. "Maybe we should leave the complicated stuff to the real operators and find something more suitable for our diversity hire." Laughter rippled through parts of the room, and Sarah felt her jaw clench involuntarily. Sergeant Rick Walsh was a 10-year veteran of special operations who had never bothered to hide his resentment about women being allowed into combat roles. His comment was typical of the casual disrespect she had endured throughout her career. Commander Morrison's voice cut through the laughter like a blade. "Sergeant Walsh, you will show proper respect to all members of this unit, or you will find yourself assigned to latrine duty for the remainder of your deployment." Walsh mumbled an apology, but the damage was done. The room buzzed with whispered comments and sideways glances. Sarah had been through this scenario countless times before, but it never got easier. Every mission became a test not just of her tactical abilities, but of her right to exist in this brotherhood of warriors. Captain Mike Torres, a Delta Force operator sitting beside her, leaned over and whispered, "Don't let these idiots get to you. Half of them couldn't hit a barn door from 50 yards. Sarah appreciated the support, but she knew that words meant nothing in this environment. Only performance mattered, and she would need to prove herself again and again until these men finally accepted that she belonged among them. Morrison continued the briefing, outlining the mission specifics. The operation would be divided into 3 phases. First, a reconnaissance team would establish observation posts to monitor enemy movement and identify target locations. Second, assault teams would move into position to eliminate perimeter guards and secure the compound. Finally, the sniper team would provide overwatch and eliminate any high-value targets that attempted to escape. "Chen, you'll be primary sniper for this operation," Morrison announced. "Your position will be on the ridgeline approximately 800 meters from the target compound. You'll have clear lines of sight to all potential escape routes." The assignment was both an honor and a burden. As primary sniper, Sarah would be responsible for the most critical shots of the entire mission. Success would validate her presence on the team, but failure would provide ammunition for those who questioned whether women belonged in combat roles. Sergeant Walsh raised his hand. "Sir, shouldn't we have backup sniper support? This seems like a lot of responsibility for someone with limited field experience." Sarah's face flushed with anger, but she remained silent. Walsh's comment was deliberately misleading. She had more successful long-range eliminations than anyone else in the room, including Walsh himself. Her limited field experience consisted of 47 confirmed kills across 3 deployments, with an accuracy rating that exceeded military standards by a significant margin. Morrison's response was sharp and immediate. "Lieutenant Chen has more successful long-range eliminations than any sniper currently assigned to this base. Her qualifications are not subject to debate." The room fell silent, but Sarah could feel the resentment radiating from several directions. She understood that Morrison's defense, while appreciated, would only increase the pressure on her to perform flawlessly. In this world, being good enough was never sufficient for someone like her. She had to be perfect. The briefing continued for another hour, covering communication protocols, extraction procedures, and contingency plans for various scenarios. Sarah took detailed notes, memorizing every aspect of the terrain and identifying potential complications that could affect her shooting positions. As the meeting concluded, most of the operators filed out without acknowledging her presence. A few offered neutral nods, while others made pointed comments about hoping the mission wouldn't be compromised by political correctness. Captain Torres remained behind as the room emptied. "You know this is going to be a circus, right?" he said quietly. "Everyone will be watching to see if you can handle the pressure." Sarah nodded, appreciating his honesty. "I've been dealing with this my entire career. The only difference is that tomorrow, people's lives will depend on my performance rather than just my reputation." Torres studied her face carefully. "For what it's worth, I've seen your shooting scores. If I were pinned down by enemy fire, I'd want you covering my back." The compliment meant more to Sarah than Torres probably realized. Acceptance from peers was rare in her experience, and she treasured every genuine expression of confidence in her abilities. That evening, Sarah sat alone in her quarters, cleaning and inspecting her rifle with the methodical precision that had been drilled into her during countless training sessions. Each component was examined, tested, and carefully reassembled until the weapon achieved a level of mechanical perfection that matched her own preparation standards. She thought about the challenges that awaited her in less than 8 hours. The shots she would need to make were technically difficult but well within her capabilities. The real challenge would be performing under the scrutiny of people who wanted her to fail. Sarah had learned early in her military career that being a female in special operations meant that every mistake was magnified while every success was minimized. Male operators who missed shots were having bad days. When she missed, it was proof that women didn't belong in combat. Male operators who made excellent shots were doing their jobs. When she made the same shots, it was dismissed as luck or attributed to favorable conditions. The unfairness of this double standard had initially filled her with rage, but she had learned to channel that anger into motivation. Every slight, every dismissive comment, every condescending attitude became fuel for her determination to exceed every expectation placed upon her. As she lay on her narrow military cot, Sarah visualized the upcoming mission in minute detail. She mentally rehearsed each potential shot, considering wind conditions, target movement patterns, and the ballistic characteristics of her ammunition at various ranges. This mental preparation had become as important to her success as physical training or technical proficiency. The base around her settled into the relative quiet of night watch, punctuated by the occasional sound of vehicles moving between buildings or guards checking perimeters. Tomorrow would bring combat, and with it, another opportunity to prove that her presence among America's elite warriors was earned rather than granted. Sarah closed her eyes and focused on controlling her breathing, using meditation techniques she had learned to manage pre-mission anxiety. Tomorrow, she would face not only enemy combatants, but also the skeptical eyes of her own teammates. Both challenges would require her to perform at levels that exceeded normal human capabilities. The mockery she had endured in the briefing room still echoed in her mind, but she pushed those thoughts aside. Words were weapons that could only harm her if she allowed them to penetrate her mental armor. Tomorrow, she would respond to skepticism with precision, doubt with performance, and mockery with results that could not be questioned or dismissed. The pre-dawn darkness felt thick and oppressive as Sarah checked her equipment one final time. Her pack contained everything she would need for a mission that could last 12 to 18 hours. Extra ammunition, water, emergency rations, communication equipment, and medical supplies. Each item had been carefully selected and positioned to maintain optimal weight distribution during the challenging mountain climb ahead. At 3:45 hours, the team assembled in the motor pool area where modified Humvees waited to transport them to the helicopter landing zone. Sarah noticed that several operators continued to avoid eye contact with her, while others watched her preparations with obvious skepticism. She ignored the social dynamics and focused on her equipment checklist, methodically verifying that every piece of gear functioned properly. Master Sergeant Carlos Rodriguez approached her as she secured her rifle case. Rodriguez was a 20-year veteran of special operations who commanded respect from everyone in the unit. His opinion carried significant weight among the operators, and Sarah had been hopping to earn his approval since joining the team. "Chen, you ready for this?" Rodriguez asked, his tone neutral but not unfriendly. "Yes, Master Sergeant," she replied, maintaining eye contact. "I've studied the terrain maps and weather reports. Conditions should be favorable for long-range shooting." Rodriguez nodded slowly. "The boys are watching you closely today. Some of them are hoping you'll prove their point about women in combat roles." Sarah appreciated his directness. "I understand the situation, Master Sergeant. I'm prepared to do my job." "Good," Rodriguez said. Because if you screw this up, it won't just affect your career. It'll make things harder for every woman who comes after you. The weight of that responsibility was something Sarah carried constantly. She wasn't just fighting for her own success, but for the future opportunities of women who might follow in her footsteps. The pressure was enormous, but she had learned to use it as motivation rather than allowing it to become a burden. The convoy departed on schedule, traveling through darkened roads that wound through valleys between towering mountain peaks. The landscape was austere and unforgiving, with rocky terrain that provided perfect hiding places for insurgents. Sarah watched through night vision goggles as the scenery passed by, mentally noting potential ambush sites and escape routes. 40 minutes later, they reached the helicopter landing zone where two Black Hawk helicopters waited with rotors slowly turning. The aircraft were configured for special operations missions, with advanced avionics and defensive systems that would allow them to operate in hostile territory. As the team boarded the helicopters, Sarah found herself seated next to Lieutenant Danny Park, a Navy SEAL who had graduated from sniper school 6 months after her. Park was one of the few operators who had consistently treated her as an equal rather than an intruder. Nervous, Park asked as the helicopter lifted off and began climbing toward the mountains. Focused, Sarah replied, "You." Park grinned. Always nervous before a mission. Anyone who isn't nervous is either lying or stupid. The honesty was refreshing. Most of the operators maintained facades of complete confidence that Sarah knew were partially false. Combat was inherently unpredictable, and only foolish people failed to acknowledge the risks involved. The helicopter flight took 35 minutes, flying low through mountain valleys to avoid radar detection. Sarah used the time to review her mission briefing materials and study photographs of the target area. The compound was situated on a plateau surrounded by steep terrain, with limited access routes that would make assault extremely difficult. Her sniper position would be on a ridgeline 830 meters from the main building, where intelligence reports suggested the high-value targets would be meeting. The distance was challenging but well within her capabilities, assuming weather conditions remained favorable. At 5:15 hours, the helicopters touched down in a landing zone approximately 3 miles from the target compound. The team quickly unloaded their equipment and established a temporary command post behind a cluster of large rocks that provided concealment from enemy observation. Commander Morrison gathered the team leaders for a final briefing. Weather reports indicate increasing wind speeds throughout the morning, with gusts potentially reaching 15 miles per hour by 800 hours. Cloud cover should remain minimal, providing good visibility for overwatch positions. Sarah made mental calculations about wind compensation for her shots. 15-mile-per-hour gusts would require significant adjustments to her aiming points, particularly for longer-range targets. She would need to time her shots carefully to account for momentary wind variations. The team divided into 3 groups according to the operational plan. Alpha Team would establish observation posts to monitor enemy movement and provide early warning of any changes in the tactical situation. Bravo Team would move into assault positions and wait for the signal to breach the compound perimeter. Charlie Team, which included Sarah, would establish overwatch positions to provide sniper support and prevent enemy escape. As the teams prepared to move out, Sergeant Walsh made another pointed comment within Sarah's hearing range. "Hope our shooter doesn't choke when the pressure gets real." Several operators chuckled, but Rodriguez immediately silenced them with a sharp look. "Focus on your own jobs," he said firmly. "Chen has earned her position on this team." Sarah appreciated Rodriguez's support, but she knew that words would not change the attitudes of skeptical teammates. Only performance would accomplish that goal, and she was determined to deliver results that exceeded everyone's expectations. Charlie Team began their movement toward the ridgeline at 5:30 hours, following a circuitous route that would keep them concealed from enemy observation posts. The terrain was treacherous, with loose rocks and steep inclines that made silent movement extremely difficult. Sarah's compact build proved advantageous in navigating the narrow paths and tight spaces between boulders. Captain Torres led the team, setting a pace that balanced speed with stealth. They moved in single file, maintaining communication through hand signals and staying alert for signs of enemy patrols. Intelligence reports suggested that the Taliban forces in the area had established roaming security teams that could appear anywhere along the approaches to their compound. After 90 minutes of careful movement, Charlie team reached the base of the ridgeline where Sarah would establish her shooting position. The climb to the crest would be the most dangerous part of their approach, as they would be exposed to observation from the enemy compound during the final 100 meters. Torres positioned the other team members in security positions, while Sarah began her climb to the sniper's nest. She moved slowly and deliberately, using available cover to mask her movement from enemy observers. Each step was calculated to minimize noise and avoid displacing rocks that might reveal her position. The ridgeline position offered an excellent view of the target compound, which sprawled across the plateau like a small fortress. Sarah could see multiple buildings connected by walls and defensive positions that would make direct assault extremely costly. Through her spotting scope, she identified guard posts, vehicle positions, and potential escape routes that fleeing targets might use. The main building where the high-value targets were expected to meet was a two-story structure positioned in the center of the compound. Large windows on the upper floor would provide her with clear shooting opportunities, assuming the targets positioned themselves predictably during their meeting. Sarah established her shooting position behind a cluster of rocks that provided excellent concealment, while offering clear lines of sight to all areas of the compound. She carefully arranged her equipment to ensure that she could engage multiple targets quickly if the tactical situation required rapid target engagement. Her rifle was perfectly zeroed for the distance to the compound, but she made minute adjustments to account for current wind conditions and the slight downward angle of her shots. These technical details were critical for achieving the precision that would be required during the mission. At 700 hours, Alpha Team reported increased activity around the compound, as several vehicles arrived carrying what appeared to be high-ranking insurgent leaders. Sarah watched through her scope as men in traditional Afghan clothing gathered near the main building, their body language suggesting the importance of their meeting. Torres monitored radio communications from the command post, relaying updates about enemy movement and changes in the tactical situation. "Multiple vehicles arriving from the north," he reported quietly. "Looks like our targets are assembling for their meeting." Sarah adjusted her position slightly to improve her view of the main building entrance. Through her scope, she could see armed guards taking positions around the perimeter, while the leadership figures moved inside for their conference. The waiting period that followed tested her patience and concentration. Sniper operations often involved hours of motionless observation, maintaining perfect readiness while monitoring for fleeting opportunities to engage targets. Sarah had learned to enter an almost meditative state during these periods, staying alert while conserving mental energy for the critical moments when action would be required. At 7:45 hours, Commander Morrison's voice crackled through the radio with final mission authorization. "All teams, this is command. You are cleared to engage targets as opportunities present themselves. Execute mission objectives." Sarah felt her heart rate increase slightly as the mission transitioned from preparation to active combat operations. Around the compound, she could see enemy guards maintaining their positions, while the leadership meeting continued inside the main building. The real test of her abilities was about to begin, and she knew that dozens of her teammates would be evaluating her performance with critical eyes. The mockery she had endured in the briefing room would either be validated or proven wrong by her actions during the next few hours. Through her rifle scope, Sarah watched for the first target to appear, her finger resting lightly on the trigger as she prepared to demonstrate that her presence among America's elite warriors was earned through skill rather than politics. The mountains around her seemed to hold their breath as the mission entered its most dangerous phase. At 8:12 hours, the first target emerged from the main building. Through her scope, Sarah could see a tall man in dark robes gesturing animatedly to several guards positioned near the entrance. Intelligence briefings had identified this individual as Rashid al-Mansouri, a bomb maker responsible for attacks that had killed dozens of coalition soldiers. Sarah's breathing slowed to a controlled rhythm as she aligned her crosshairs with the target's center mass. The distance was 847 meters according to her laser rangefinder, with a slight crosswind from the northeast at approximately 8 miles per hour. She made microscopic adjustments to compensate for environmental factors that could affect bullet trajectory. The radio crackled with Tor's quiet voice. "Charlie 1, you have eyes on primary target at building entrance. Wind holding steady at current levels." "Charlie 1 copies," Sarah whispered into her microphone. "Target acquired, awaiting optimal shot opportunity." Al-Mansouri moved away from the building entrance, walking toward a covered area where several other men waited beside parked vehicles. His movement pattern suggested he was preparing to depart, possibly to coordinate attacks that would kill innocent civilians. Sarah tracked the target through her scope, waiting for him to pause in a position that would allow for a clean shot. Patience was critical in sniper operations. Rushing a shot could result in a miss that would compromise the entire mission and endanger her teammates. The target stopped beside a Toyota pickup truck, turning to face the building as he spoke with another insurgent leader. Sarah had her opportunity. She controlled her breathing, let out half a breath, and gently squeezed the trigger. The rifle recoiled against her shoulder with familiar precision. Through her scope, she watched al-Mansouri collapse instantly as the 7.62 bullet struck him in the upper chest. The other insurgents around the vehicle looked around in confusion, unable to determine the source of the shot. "Target down," Sarah reported calmly. "Primary objective eliminated." Before the enemy could react effectively, a second high-value target emerged from the main building. Sarah recognized him from intelligence photographs as Hassan al-Badri, a logistics coordinator who managed weapons smuggling operations throughout the region. Al-Badri began moving quickly toward the vehicles, apparently realizing that the compound was under attack. Sarah tracked his movement, leading him slightly to account for his speed and the time required for her bullet to travel the distance to the target. Her second shot was fired 12 seconds after the first. Al-Badri stumbled and fell approximately 10 meters from the vehicle he had been trying to reach. Around the compound, enemy guards began taking defensive positions and scanning the surrounding terrain for signs of the sniper. "Second target eliminated," Sarah reported. "Enemy forces becoming aware of sniper threat." Commander Morrison's voice came through the radio. "Outstanding work, Charlie 1. Continue engaging targets of opportunity." What happened next would become legendary among special operations communities. As enemy guards attempted to organize a response to the sniper threat, Sarah systematically eliminated each target that presented itself with mechanical precision that seemed almost superhuman. The third target was a guard who climbed onto the roof of a secondary building, attempting to spot her position with binoculars. Sarah's bullet struck him center mass before he could complete his scan of the ridgeline. The fourth target was an insurgent who ran from the main building toward a defensive position, carrying what appeared to be a rocket-propelled grenade launcher. Sarah's shot dropped him in the open courtyard, eliminating a significant threat to the assault teams. The fifth and sixth targets were two guards who attempted to establish a machine gun position on the compound's northern wall. Sarah eliminated both men with shots fired 4 seconds apart, preventing them from bringing heavy weapons to bear against her teammates. By this point, panic was spreading through the enemy compound as insurgents realized they were facing a sniper of extraordinary capability. Men ran for cover while others attempted to identify her position, but the distance and her excellent concealment made counter-sniper fire impossible. The seventh target was an insurgent who emerged from a building carrying what appeared to be communication equipment. Sarah's shot prevented him from calling for reinforcements that could complicate the mission. The eighth and ninth targets were guards who attempted to move a vehicle into position to provide cover for evacuating leadership figures. Sarah's rapid fire eliminated both men before they could complete their maneuver. As word of the sniper's effectiveness spread through the radio network, Sarah could hear the amazement in her teammates' voices. "Holy shit, she's dropping them like flies," someone whispered over an open channel. The 10th target was another insurgent leader who attempted to escape through a rear exit of the compound. Sarah's shot at 892 meters was her longest of the engagement, requiring precise compensation for increased wind effects at the extended range. The 11th target was a guard who climbed into a watchtower, attempting to provide overwatch for the remaining enemy forces. Sarah's bullet struck him as he was raising his rifle to scan for her position. The 12th and final target was the most challenging shot of the engagement. Ahmed al-Rashid himself appeared briefly in an upper window of the main building, apparently trying to assess the tactical situation before attempting his own escape. The window provided only a limited target area, and al-Rashid was visible for just a few seconds before moving back into the building. Sarah had to make instant calculations about bullet drop, wind compensation, and the reduced target size presented by the window opening. Her final shot was fired at 8:27 hours, exactly 15 minutes after her first engagement. Through her scope, she watched al-Rashid fall backward into the building as her bullet found its mark. "Primary high-value target eliminated," she reported, her voice still calm despite having just completed one of the most impressive shooting displays in special operations history. The radio network erupted with congratulations and expressions of amazement from operators who had witnessed her performance. 12 shots, 12 kills, Tors announced. "Outstanding shooting, Chen." Bravo team moved into the compound to secure any remaining enemy forces and gather intelligence materials. They encountered no resistance. The surviving insurgents had either fled or were too demoralized to offer meaningful opposition. As the teams conducted their post-mission activities, Sarah remained in her overwatch position, scanning for potential threats that might emerge from surrounding terrain. Her job was not finished until all friendly forces had safely departed the area. The helicopter extraction proceeded without incident, and by 9:45 hours, all teams were aboard aircraft heading back to the forward operating base. During the flight, Sarah noticed that the attitude of her teammates had changed dramatically. Operators who had previously ignored or dismissed her now looked at her with obvious respect and admiration. Sergeant Walsh, who had made disparaging comments about her capabilities, approached her as the helicopter prepared to land. "That was some of the finest shooting I've ever witnessed," he said, his voice lacking any trace of his previous condescension. "I owe you an apology for my comments yesterday." Sarah nodded acknowledgement but didn't respond verbally. She understood that his change of attitude was based on her performance rather than a genuine evolution in his thinking, but she appreciated the gesture nonetheless. Master Sergeant Rodriguez was more direct in his assessment. "Chen, that was textbook sniper work under pressure. You saved lives today and completed the mission exactly as planned." The praise meant more to Sarah than Rodriguez probably realized. Earning respect from experienced operators was far more valuable than any formal recognition or awards she might receive. When the helicopters touched down at the base, word of her performance had already spread through the special operations community. The mission briefing that evening was standing room only as operators from other units came to hear details about the engagement. Commander Morrison presented the mission results to an audience that included senior officers from multiple commands. The operation was a complete success, with all primary objectives accomplished and 0 friendly casualties. Lieutenant Chen's sniper support was instrumental in achieving these results. The statistics spoke for themselves. 12 enemy combatants eliminated with 12 shots fired, including 3 high-value targets and 9 enemy fighters who posed direct threats to assault team members. The accuracy rate was 100%, achieved under combat conditions that included variable wind, extended ranges, and time pressure. That night, Sarah sat in her quarters cleaning her rifle with the same methodical precision she always employed. The weapon had performed flawlessly during the engagement, and she wanted to ensure it would be equally reliable during future missions. Captain Torres knocked on her door and entered when she invited him inside. "How are you feeling about today's mission?" he asked. Sarah considered the question carefully. "Satisfied that I did my job correctly," she replied. "The mission succeeded and everyone came home safely." Torres smiled. "That's a very professional answer, but I think you can admit that you proved some people wrong today." She had indeed proven people wrong, but Sarah knew that her battle for acceptance was far from over. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities to demonstrate her capabilities. Each mission would be another test, and she would need to maintain the same level of performance that had characterized today's engagement. The mockery she had endured in the briefing room now seemed like a distant memory, replaced by the respect of warriors who had witnessed her capabilities firsthand. But Sarah understood that respect in the special operations community was earned through consistent performance rather than single impressive demonstrations. As she finished cleaning her rifle and prepared for sleep, Sarah reflected on the day's events with quiet satisfaction. She had faced both enemy fire and skeptical teammates, emerging victorious in both encounters. The 12 shots she fired had eliminated 12 threats to her teammates and innocent civilians, while simultaneously proving that her presence among America's elite warriors was earned through skill, training, and determination. The female Navy SEAL sniper had silenced her critics with precision rather than words, demonstrating that excellence recognizes no gender boundaries. Tomorrow would bring new missions and new challenges, but today had established her reputation as one of the finest snipers in special operations history. Her rifle, freshly cleaned and perfectly maintained, rested beside her cot as a reminder of the responsibility she carried. In her hands, that weapon became an instrument of protection for those who could not protect themselves, wielded by someone who had proven beyond any doubt that she belonged among the warriors who defend freedom in the world's most dangerous places.